What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for asking. This video is a bit centered on veterans or veteran spouses of all different ages, and I'm going to explain why in a few minutes. Also, I have my phone on. Usually I put it on airplane mode because I don't want to interrupt in a video, but I'm expecting a call. So if I get the call, I will interrupt myself and put this on pause and come back. So basically what this video is about is getting veteran benefits. I served in the Army back in the 70s. Into the early 80s I got out. And for 45 years, it was just something I did. For 45 years, never looked back. One of the issues I ran into when I went in was 78. In 1978, Carter had already come in 76 and basically eviscerated the GI Bill. The GI Bill had a lot of different benefits. School, home loans, all kinds of different stuff. And there was a lot of benefits that were taken out during that during I don't want to get too political, but I think Carter was the worst president for the military. I just believe that in a lot of ways because of that, but also more to the point, when I went in, I was stationed at the 82nd Airborne, and going to a RANT to try and rescue the hostages was a debacle. And that went on and on and on, like it went on for a year. I think it was the day of inauguration that Reagan came into office that they released the hostages. And contrary to popular belief, it wasn't that the Iranians were afraid of Reagan, because everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks it's like, oh, Carter was weak and he wouldn't, pull the trigger. Whereas when Reagan came in, they immediately released the hostages because they were fearful of Reagan. And it wasn't that at all. The real story is that they hated Carter. And so the deal was negotiated to let them go on Inauguration Day. I think it was either September or October. So we had to wait another 3 months or so before they were released because to save face, the Iranians brokered that deal to make sure that they were released, but they were going to wait till Reagan came in to embarrass Carter. That's the real story. That being said, I don't give him a lot of credit for having just, drug his feet for so long, because I remember when that was going on. And I was kind of upset that, they didn't do anything. They really didn't do anything. But anyway, all that being said, I have some issues with the VA now. I joined up, I think it was 18. I want to think it was 2018. I had gone about my life for 40 plus years, not really looking back on it, just believing, okay, it was just something I did, and I just kind of moved on with my life. Interesting, though, I didn't know what I know now. What I know now is that some of the things that happened to me when I was in the military, health-wise, are compensatable now, which I had no clue, because nobody was there to tell me. In fact, I don't even think it was, it may have been a thing, but I went through all the 80s and 90s and 2000s all the way up until, 2024, without even knowing about this, without having a clue that this was available to me. Just didn't know. So the way that I found out about it was I was in the Philippines back in 2024. Yeah, 2024, I was in the Philippines. And so I was at a bar, and this guy had bought me a drink. Well, so the waitress brought me over the drink, and it was a beer, and I don't drink beer. And so I'm like, I didn't order this. And she said, no, the guy over there did. So eventually he came over and he talked to me, and he's like, I saw the airborne wings on your phone case that I have on my hip. And I thought I'd just, give you a beer because I'm also, Army. I'm like, yeah, Army. So we chit-chatted about that. Anyway, eventually the conversation led to his rating and what am I rated at? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What am I rated at? I don't know. Like, I'm rated, probably a 4 by some women and maybe a 9 by others. And he's like, no, 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 that's not what I meant, like by the VA. And I'm like, I don't know even what you're talking about. So apparently he was rated at 100% for various other health issues that he has. That 100% begets a $4,000 paycheck every month. So besides his SSI and whatever retirement I didn't ask him about that he has coming to him, he also has that $4,000. So he was just living up large, like I believe he lives in the Philippines, but he was just out every night, which I wouldn't, waste my money on that. But he said, I can't spend it fast enough, which is true in the Philippines. It's hard to spend that kind of money. So that perked up my ears, and he's like, when you get back, you need to get into the VA system and, do your intent to file and yada, yada, yada. So the terminology and the process was very foreign to me. Like all of the terminology, DBQ and CNP and blah, 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 blah. It was just like the Charlie Brown cartoon where the teacher is talking and it's like, nah, 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 she's saying English, but you're hearing it as blah, 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 whatever. I just didn't understand the system. I didn't understand. There's no checklist. They don't, when you go to the VA or when you put your intent to file, they don't then send you a form that says, okay, here's the steps that you need to take and here's the things that you need to do in order to get rated. They don't have a list like that. So inevitably what happens is it creates a void. And who fills the void? You have a lot of YouTubers that fill the void, ex-military guys that decide to form a company, whether that's a company that they have on YouTube or a legit, like LLC type of company. And there are some of those in the Philippines as well where, there's 4, 5, 6 guys that run an organization where they take payment in order to get you through all of this ignorance that you don't know. Ignorance doesn't mean you're stupid, it just means you don't know. Typically, what they're charging, because they do charge for that, is 6 months worth of your benefits. So if you finally end up getting rated, and let's say that rating gets you $1,000 a month, right? So they want $6,000. And then the rest of it's yours thereafter. In a way that sounds reasonable because they're going through the hoops, they're collecting paperwork from you, they're asking you questions, they're basically pushing this ball forward, right? So it kind of seems reasonable. At one point, I almost latched on to one of those companies. In fact, I even gave them my social security number, which I shouldn't have done. But I don't know, I kind of felt like it's almost like if they make a mistake or if they don't dot one I or cross one T, this could all flounder. This could all go fail. And I don't know. I don't know. But it's very, very tempting for those people like myself that don't know the system. And they don't know about what a nexus letter is and all this different terminology that nobody talks about except on YouTube and except for these organizations. Like, you have to find all this stuff out by yourself. It's very daunting. One of the biggest issues, I'm going to talk about has to do with records. Because, as I said, when I got out, it was just like, okay, it's just something I did. But in the same token, I don't have any medical records. Like, most of my life going forward, I really didn't go to a doctor. Like, annual checkups and stuff like that, because I couldn't afford to. But also, I've never really had any health issues where I needed to. And then the few times that I've been injured or something has happened to me where I go to like a meta center or some doctor, a specialty doctor or something like that, I never thought about saving records. I never thought about saving their name or phone number. Like, how would I know 25 years ago what doctor I went to? Like, I don't have that. I don't have like a general practitioner doctor through the years that I've gone to. So I don't have any of those records, nor do I have any records from the military. 9 times out of 10, if you were sick or injured or anything was going on in the military, you sucked it up. That's what you did back in the 70s, 80s. You just sucked it up. You were a wimp. You were a pussy if you went to sick call. So we just didn't do that back then. I remember many times I wanted to go to sick call, but I'm like, what will they say? What will my platoon say? What will they'll chat and all this stuff. And you don't want to be seen as a wimp. So you just suck it up and you don't bother going. I remember when I first joined, I was probably in my second week, maybe third week of basic training. And I got a fever, and I don't know why I got a fever, but I got a fever. And I sucked it up and sucked it up, and eventually I passed out. It was 102, if I'm not mistaken. And they put me in the infirmary. They put me eventually in the hospital. And I remember my drill sergeant had come to the hospital. I think it was the second day I was there. And he's like, hey, if you don't get better in the next day or two, you're going to get recycled. I'm like, oh, no. Recycle meaning that 2 or 3 weeks doesn't matter anymore. Like, you have to do all this over again. You have to start from scratch and do that same 2 weeks over. So the recycling thing meant I'm going to get better. Like, can't control my temperature. But anyway, the point being is that we just didn't go on sick call. And then even the times that we did go on sick call, when you exit the military, you get whatever paperwork they give you. You don't ask for stuff. Like, it never would dawn on me to, at that point when I exited, to say, hey, could I have all my medical records? Could I have, like all the times I went on sick call, my treatments and all that stuff? I just don't have any of that. Another problem was, I'm not sure when it was, but I think the people who keep the records are in St. Louis, Missouri. And I think their building caught on fire some years ago, and a lot of those records were destroyed. And so there's a lot of records that don't exist, period. So that's another issue. The records that I ended up asking for and getting, I didn't get all my records for sure, but the ones that I did it's a very complicated process to get your own records. It's all done online now. It's not like this packet that you get of hard copy, right? So it's done online, and you're given a code, like a passcode, 6 digits or something like that, and you log into their website, and you put the passcode in, and then it gives you the PDFs of these records and all that stuff. And I think it's a one and done type thing. Like, I think you can only access it once. And so if you're not smart enough to then download that at the time, you're kind of screwed. So I actually decided to print at that time, and I only have maybe 6 pages. 6 pages of 3 years? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then the worst of it was, it looked like microfiche. It looked like somebody took a screenshot of microfiche. Like, there's a lot of narrative in some of those records that I can't even make out. Like, literally, like the ink had faded. And I don't know if it's on the original copy or if it's because it was a picture of a microfiche or what. It doesn't make any sense. None of those records help me whatsoever on my filing. And I didn't see any medical records whatsoever either. I didn't even see anything about me being in the hospital when I was in basic training. Like, there just wasn't enough records there. And when you do order, just so you know, when you do order your records from, I can't remember the name, it's tip of my brain right now. But it's the Department of Defense or something like that in St. Louis, Missouri. They keep all the records. You have to be specific. So you have to say, I want any and all of XYZ. I want any and all of accommodation records. I want any and all of disciplinary records. Like, you have to be very specific in what you're asking for, because if you're not, they're not going to pick up the ball and run with it and just give you everything. You have to ask specifically for things. And I think maybe that's why I didn't get my medical records. Maybe I didn't ask for them. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it's a very arduous process that I don't look forward to, or I didn't look forward to then, and I still don't look forward to, because they're even going forward for a year, almost a year and a half now that I filed. There's still terminology that I don't understand. There's still certain things about my filing and things that they know and I don't know, and things like that. And I'm going to get to that too. When I say things they know and I don't know, it has to do with my records. Recently, and I'm just going to jump forward on my C&P for PTSD. That was done a little bit over a week ago. And the psychiatrist who was interviewing me said, well, what about this Article 15 that you got where, you told a lieutenant that you're the worst officer I've ever seen in my life? I'm like, I don't remember that. It almost like that term would have come out of my mouth at some point. When I was 20 years old, why would I say that to an officer? I don't know, but I was like, I don't remember that. And she's like, well, it's right here. And I'm like, I just don't remember. And she mentioned the lieutenant's name, and I remember his name. So, and then she's like, well, it's right. And she turned the screen to me. And then it was right there in black and white. It was clear as day, like it was just written last week. And I'm like, wow. And I was reading the narrative of the Article 15, and now I do remember that. But I don't have that in my records that they sent me. And I asked for any and all. I don't have that. So why does she have that? And she has nothing to do with my military. In fact, she's not even part of the VA. She's a contractor for the VA. Why does she have my records and I don't? Anyway, that being said, my first C&P, okay, so the three things, let me fast forward because I'll talk forever. The first thing that I wanted rating for is my tinnitus, because I was 11 Charlie, which is mortar, right? So not only through basic training and AIT, basic training, of course, M16, M203 grenade launcher, grenades themselves, Claymore mine, like all these things we were exposed to, plus the deuce and halves, because they're how they transport you around the base and stuff like that, or, whatever. So there are diesel engines going on all the time, blah, blah, blah. Then AIT had more to do with advanced individual training, and that was my MOS, so, like 81 millimeter mortar. So the 81 mortar is what we trained on, but that's a lot of noise, and it was little spongy earplugs that we had back then. A whole lot of good. Then going forward, a couple of the units I was assigned to later on, it was 4 deuce. And a 4 deuce mortar is huge, and that is very, very loud. And that was actually attached to a track. And so a track will echo, right? So not only are you firing these rounds from the track, but then the track itself is echoing this noise. So the tinnitus is one of them, which is a very small margin. I think it's $150, $160 a month is what anybody would ever get. The other one is my shoulder, my left shoulder. So about maybe 7 years ago, I was with some kids that I take to the beach on occasion, a friend of mine's kids, and I was throwing them around at the beach, and all of a sudden I got this little kink in my shoulder. It's like that kink you get in your neck where you can't turn it because it hurts. So I got this kink in my shoulder, and I'm like, ooh, Christ, like I couldn't even move it in a certain direction. When I got back, I went to the VA, made an appointment, and my doctor did an x-ray. And when she did the x-ray, she came back, and because I thought it was arthritis, it runs in my family. And she said, well, there might be a little arthritis that but the thing that stood out was this bone that had fused behind the scapula. I'm like, bone that fused? She's like, when did you break that bone? I'm like, I've never broken a bone in my shoulder, especially my left shoulder. I'm right-handed. Like, I just don't recall having broken a bone there. And she said, yeah, well, there was a fusion at some point. And then it dawned on me. The 5 points of contact that you have when you're a parachutist is, well, I can't show it now, but it's basically, the edge of your foot, your knee / thigh area, your hip, and then, of course, your shoulder. And that was it. That was it. And so I know on one of my jumps that I made that I had broken this bone, but, at that time I was 19. I think I was 19 years old at that time. And I was tough, and if it did hurt, I sucked it up at the time. And And then, of course, my left knee too hurts from time to time. In fact, that was prior to me finding out about the bone, is that my left knee would have a lot of pain in it from time to time. And I remember when I first joined the VA in 18, I think by 19, I had asked for some type of x-ray because I thought the same thing. I have arthritis or whatever. Long story short, my doctor prescribed me naproxen, which I still take today from time to time if it flares up. So that's the knee and the shoulder thing. That's the second thing that I'm trying to get rated for, and then the PTSD would be the third. But the process of getting this done is ridiculous. So I thought, as I'm investigating more into this, I thought that it was contingent on me. The way that the VA does this is they have, as I said, outside contractors. So these contractors, the VA can't handle this swath of people that are doing these exams. They don't have that kind of personnel, so they basically part out these exams to third party. So they sent me to an audiologist to give me tests for my hearing, which is kind of weird because there's nothing wrong with my hearing. I can hear, it's just muffled a little bit by the ringing and buzzing sometimes from the tinnitus. So the hearing test was kind of weird, but whatever. In my mind, now it's up to me to get my own testing done by a doctor who will write a nexus letter. And the nexus letter basically saying, I, blah, 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 whatever, doctor, have done a thorough exam on this patient, blah, blah, blah. And after consulting with him, taking x-rays, doing my exam, it's come to my conclusion that more likely than not, based on my MOS and based on what I had told him about my MOS, more likely than not, that this tinnitus began in the military. Now, I could have worked in a machine shop for the last 20 years or 30 years. I could have worked at an airport for the last 20 or 30 years and contributed some of this tinnitus to the beginning phase, but the beginning phase started in the military. And that's what a nexus letter is about. And it's the same with the knee and the shoulder. Since I had an x-ray done about 4 or 5 years ago already on the shoulder, I now have a record of that with the VA. So the VA knows about this x-ray and they know about my knee x-ray and all that stuff. So they're aware of that. So is it now contingent on me to now get a third party of my own opinion? Do I go get an orthopedic doctor to write a nexus letter for me and spend anywhere from $500 to $1,000 out of my own pocket to get this nexus letter taken care of? Saying that more likely than not, based on the injury and based on what he told me, that this injury happened in the military. And I was told by, basically there's an organization at the American Legion near me called Vet to Vet. And I was all geared up next week to have an appointment and pay $500 for a nexus letter to an orthopedic doctor. And the Vet to Vet organization told me, no, you're jumping the gun. I'm like, why? Well, we're going to wait until they turn you down, and once they turn you down, then you can gather that evidence. And in my line of thinking, it's like, no, if they have their doctor saying one thing and I need my doctor to say another, it should be all transparent. It should be all out there already. But that's not what they're telling me, and they know better than I do. I did, however, have a psychiatrist that they had referred me to write me out a letter. I met with her for 2 hours, and she wrote me out a letter. It was about 3 months ago, basically saying that yes, he has PTSD and this is the reasons behind it, etc., etc., etc. Whatever she wrote, it was a couple, 3 or 4 pages long. That I did turn into the VA, and the American Legion told me, hey, we sent you to Dr. such and such, and did you work out? I'm like, it worked out great. I paid her money, it was a couple $100 that I paid her, and it worked out great. Yeah, hold on to that. I'm like, I already turned it in. You already turned it in? I'm like, yeah. Like, See, nobody tells you this stuff. And they're like, okay, no harm, no foul, but yeah, you should have waited until they turn you down. And I'm like, this is a game. This is so much of a... It shouldn't be this way with the VA. If you're putting in for a claim, whether they send you to your own doctor, you get your own doctor's opinion and a letter and nexus letter and all that stuff, you know, all that information needs to be there first before they make any decision, is my opinion. Why do we have to get turned down to then have to fight again a second time? Because what they're telling me is, if they turn you down, we appeal the decision. On any one of your three, we appeal the decision. And then we get our evidence with outside doctors or outside lawyers that know about VA fighting and all this stuff. And then we got to go through this whole process over again and get new evidence and, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's just, it seems like you're fighting, well, not seem, you're fighting for something that's due to you that I should have gotten from the first year or two I was out. From the first year or two I was out, it would have been a lot easier for me to have gone to doctors outside or even to the VA and somehow document my injuries, somehow document all that stuff back in 1981. Not now. Now is a lot harder. I mean, I've even run into Vietnam veterans who had a combat MOS in Vietnam, turned down for Agent Orange. What and what? So the whole process is very, as I said, very, very daunting and very, it wears on you. Like it gets to the point where I have to set my mind and my day in advance thinking about, oh, I gotta take care of this, I gotta get my paperwork together, I gotta fill out these forms and all that stuff, and I don't want to do it. I do not want to do it, and I have to motivate myself to do it. When I first signed up, I had, as I said, I had already sent to St. Louis for my records in preparation to do my intent to file. I had my DD-214, I had all of this paperwork, I had my statements already written, all that stuff, and they just sat in a pile, you know, during that 11-month period. You have a year before that intent to file expires. I waited till 11th month. And I didn't wait till the 11th month because I was waiting for time to tick by so I could get a bigger check later. I didn't find that out until later. I waited, I procrastinated because it was so daunting to me. It's like, I don't even want to deal with it. You know, it almost is like they probably get rid of a lot of people through attrition. You know, there are probably some people who start the process and then just give up. You know, that's how I felt. Do I want to fight this fight? Do I want to go through this whole process only to find out that they're not going to give me anything anyway? And then do I want to fight the second fight or even the third fight to now do it again? In fact, the American Legion had told me only, 2 months ago, after my year had expired, which my year had expired in, well, strike that. So about a month after my year had expired, the VA is still doing their thing. So just because, you know, I put in 11 months and all that stuff, my year expired on that intent to file, but they said, do another intent to file. And I'm like, why? Like, this one's not even done. Because your intent to file a second time has to do with an appeal. I'm like, I should assume that they're going to turn me down and I need to appeal? And they're like, yeah, that's why your second intent to file needs to be done like ASAP. And I'm like, okay, wow. See, I don't know this. As I started the video with, there's no list, there's no concise A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and all the different steps and all the different things you have to do proactively to get this ball rolling. Well, because of the title of my video and the content of what this video has to do with, there's probably going to be a lot of veterans that chime in and that have recommendations for VSO or this place or that place, or like I said before, you know, some of these organizations, and I use the term lightly because the organization could be one person or it could be 12 that help you get your rating, but at the end of the day, you still got to pay for that. And I guess the logic is that you're going to pay X amount of dollars to your doctor out of your own pocket that they recommend because they're going to know how to do. See, this is another thing. There's a lot of practitioners out there that don't know what a nexus letter is. I can't tell you how many phone calls I made trying to find an orthopedic doctor office, as it were, because we can't talk to the doctor, that even know what a nexus letter is, let alone if they do one or not. So making those calls to all of these different orthopedic doctors only to fall on deaf ears because they don't know what a nexus letter is. And there's a lot of practices that won't do a nexus letter because once they find out, they're like, ooh, don't know if I want to deal with the government because they might call me out on what I write. Trust me, the VA is so busy and so little staff that they don't have the time to call all these doctors where these veterans have gotten nexus letters from. They don't have time to do a follow-up. There's no harm, no foul, but the doctors don't know that. So they're usually going to decline, you know, to even do one, no matter what the cost would be. So as I said before, I so rudely interrupted myself, I'm sure there's a lot of veterans and stuff like that are going to chime in with their own link that they're going to put in the comment section. And by all means, you know, if you have an easier way to do things, if you have an easier organization to help you through to get things done, if you have doctors that you can put in there, different types of doctors or a list of doctors. In fact, there's one that I was recommended to when I was in the Philippines, and he's a state over from me. He's in North Carolina. It would be about a 5-hour drive for me to get to him. But he wants to do this orthopedic nexus letter thing online. Like he wants to do a virtual inspection. He wants to do a virtual appointment with me, with my orthopedic issue, with my... How are you going to do that without taking an x-ray? How are you going to do that virtually? And you know what he wants? $1,500 to do a nexus letter. Assuming that I even get rated for it. What if I don't? I just threw away $1,500. No, I didn't go with him. So yeah, it's very, very daunting. And I have met guys from Vietnam and other conflicts who don't even know about getting rated. Like I didn't know. So there's that too. And if you're a wife of a veteran, or you're a veteran, a female veteran, and you don't know about this, I'm highly... Now, you know, you can't go in there and go, oh, you know, I have this injury, you know, related to my time in service, and you really didn't. You know, like you were pushing a pencil somewhere in headquarters and you got a paper cut. Or you were a cook and you burned your hand. Well, I guess that could be rated, couldn't it? Yeah. If you were a cook and cut your finger or burn your hand or something like that. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you feel like you deserve it, take it. One of the reasons I procrastinated, even after I found out, and that guy had told me about it, I'm like, you know what? I'm not blind. I'm not missing a leg or a foot or a toe. I'm not missing an arm. I'm not, you know, an amputee. I'm not any of that. You know, these guys who went to Afghanistan and Iraq, let them take that money. And the guy said to me, the government has no loyalty to you whatsoever. So don't feel like you have loyalty to them. Like they will drop you. I even heard that some of these ratings that people get are taken away if they get better, right? So if you got sleep apnea and the VA gives you a machine, you know, so you can breathe better at night and sleep better at night, then you're cured. You're basically better, and they're going to take that rating from you. That's what I heard. So yeah, they don't have a loyalty to you. And then of course you deserve it. Yeah, I deserve it. But why, if I deserved it, how come you didn't tell me about this 40 years ago? Anyway, that's all I have to say. I've said enough. Like I said, I don't have enough knowledge to guide you. I don't have enough knowledge to tell you what to do, or how to go about it, or any of that stuff. The little knowledge that I do have, I just shared with you. You know, I'm not one of these veterans on YouTube who can say, okay, and this is what you do next, and this is how you make this happen, and blah, 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 and give me a call if you need any advice. Like, that's not me. But I'm telling you what I went through. And I'm telling you some of the hiccups that I had to deal with and how I got over those. You know, like, I did the best I could to share my information with you. So that's all I have to say.